I don't ever use Mike's father's name in jackets.
Okay. What's the date today? 27th of June?
I believe it's 28th.
28th. June 28th, 1987.
I have to go home Tuesday the 30th.
And this is Joe Todd, an interview with Mrs. Patricia Helen Kerley in Oklahoma City. Where were you born?
In Bland County, Crandon, Virginia, Bland County.
And when's your birthday?
March 15th,
What year?
1960.
1960. Who is your father?
William Patton.
And your mother?
Poca Pauley. Rebecca Pauley Patton. And that's spelled Pauley.
That was her maiden name?
Mm-hmm.
Where were your parents from?
Virginia.
What kind of work did your father do?
Farmer.
Farmer. As a little girl, what chores you do in the farm?
We helped feed the stock. We carried in the wood to burn at that time, which later it was cold. And before we went to school, we churned butter. And one of these churned like this. And we would go up to the dairy. You know what a dairy is? Inside of a bank. Or the cave. We've got a big cave on right back of our house. Everybody used for a refrigerator for years and years and years before they come in. And when we come in from school, we would get our chores done, like feeding the chickens, pigs, animals, and carry our wood in. By that time, it was supper time, and we would eat, and we would wash the dishes, all up, which we, big family, we didn't have a dishwasher. We would have fights over whose turn it was to wash the dishes. It seemed like I always got whipped in every one of them. And then we would go in and get our lessons. At that time, we had about 7 books to get lessons from, not like the kids do today. You see them going straight to one book. And then maybe if it wasn't too late, oh well, while we were doing that, Mom would pop us some corn, or she'd roast chestnuts, or apples, or anything, you know, whatever hit her fancy, and we'd eat that. And we had to have a glass of milk before we went to bed. Then we would go to bed. And when I was growing up, it was 3 to bed.
How big was the house?
6 rooms.
Frame house?
Mm-hmm. We had a bigger house, and it burned down when I was about 6 years old. And I can't remember too much about it. I know Daddy said he would never build back the same house because it was too big, it cost too much, and back in those days you didn't have money. $1 was $1 when you got one. A nickel was a nickel. And we were in church every Sunday unless we were awfully sick. We had to be half dead not to be at church. And we took our pennies to put in the collection box, but there was a little chewing gum thing on the outside of Mr. Bernard's store. And all the time those pennies went in there for a stick of gum. I hope my mother never found that out. And then we would come back on from church, and here would be about 35 or 40 people extra for dinner. Of course, my mother would cook all day on Saturday. She used to make apple pies, and she'd stack them that high. I tried it one time, and it made an awful mess. And bake cakes, you know, 3 or 4 big cakes. And I can remember my favorite was that mountain tea.
Mountain tea?
Yeah, she'd go up to the woods and get the mountain. I've gone with her many times. Get the mountain tea. It grew in the woods, and the little red berries. and they are delicious. And she'd decorate her cake with those. She'd make a great big white cake and decorate it with the green leaves and the little red berries. Well, you could take an old sausage mill or a grinder, one of these old-fashioned ones, and you could put the leaves and the berries, both if you want to, in there, and grind them out and get the flavor for your cake.
What flavor was it?
Tea berry.
Tea berry.
Just like the chewing gum you can buy today. Only better. And then on late Sunday evening, I will never forget it, all the company would finally leave. Most of it was relatives, which some of them knew my mother was a good cook, and they just practically made their home there. You could never find our house empty of people. And the company eat first, 2 or 3 tables, and the kids were left last. Which I said if I ever got married, my kids would be first, the company could wait. And that's really the way it's been. Then we'd have to wash up all those dishes. My mother would get out a different plate for everything, a different pie, a cake for pie, a different plate for everything. And she had a huge old dish about that big, I don't know whoever got it. That would be filled up with chicken and dumplings or a ham or whatever. That old dish would hold anything. Anyway, we'd get up on the table and we'd wash, get that all cleaned up, and put away for supper time. Then when this company left, we did our same chores over again. Milking cows and putting the milk away, and feeding the pigs and chickens, turkeys. Turkey was a big thing back then. That's where you made your best money at Christmas time. Killing these turkeys and stuff. And hogs, of course. And the next morning we would get up and make our beds and eat our breakfast, and I could still smell that coffee before I'd get out of bed. It certainly don't smell like Michael's. And we'd eat our breakfast and we'd get our chores done, make our beds and things, and get ready to go to school. Mom right there to sit, everybody'd combed their hair, took a bath. And you took a bath in a washing tub, a huge big washing tub. You had no bathtub. Later you could buy a tin one that folded up. I never did trust it, because the water got out of it too easy. And we'd carry this milk up to this beautiful old cave, and you could go way down in the cave, and there's water in the bottom. It stayed ice cold all the time. And all the old people told us that that cave had no bottom to it, because you could throw a rock in it and you could hear that rock going and going and going. And some boys put a board across there one time and walked back out over there, which their mother certainly didn't know. And they said back in behind there was all kinds of pretty rooms and different figure-shaped things made out of the rocks. And the water dripped in there all the time, but it was never wet. The ground, was never wet.
And that cave was on your farm?
Uh-huh. It's still there. I haven't been up there since my mother was sick. My sister and I went up there, but it seemed to have all grown over, and we were afraid to go too close to it. We didn't know how it deteriorated in the years, or if there might be snakes in there. My mother was in there one time, putting away her milk, and a cottonmouth crawled right up to the top, and she couldn't get out. So Daddy, he went up there to sleep out her. He was scared to death. He thought, that she fell in that water or something, and the snake, she would dare face this cottonmouth snake. And I don't remember what he killed it with, but he took something up there and killed that cottonmouth snake. We saw several around there. And she got out.
Anyone know how far back that cave went?
No, some people says it goes back to the other side, way back to another road that goes where I have a sister lives, there's a small one there. And these boys seem to think that they could come out there, and could they have got through there to this other cave.
Did you know your grandparents?
Just one grandmother. She's all I remember.
Yeah.
And her name was Mary Margaret Patton.
Do you know if any of your grandfathers were in the Civil War?
Yes, my mother's daddy was.
Pauley?
Mm-hmm.
Which side was he on?
Now, you know, I don't know. They fought that Yankee and, what was it, Rebels?
Yeah.
So long, till I forgot about the darn thing. Like the Mason-Dixon line, I thought it was a big white mark across the road. And I don't know. Really. Now, she used to sit up at night and tell us tales, stories. And she said her mother was a little crippled woman. And her daddy had gone off to war without fighting or something. And these Yankees come through there, and all that her mother had, which would be my great-grandmother, was a little horse. And she could ride this little horse and get out a little bit to get a few things to eat, which they didn't have very much to eat. And they was going to take her horse, and she begged them not to take her horse, and they didn't take it.
Any other stories you heard about the war that you remember?
Oh, she used to sit up every night and tell us about them, but I forgot them. But I just happen to remember that one.
And they lived in that same area in Virginia?
Mm-hmm. Only on a place called Flat Top.
What part of Virginia is this?
That, I guess you call that Southwest Virginia. Not West Virginia, but Southwest Virginia. You know what I mean?
But close to West Virginia?
Uh-huh. Yeah, it's close to West Virginia line. You go over 2 mountains from Bluefield, West Virginia, and the line's right on top of the mountain. And you go over 2 mountains and you're in Virginia. Same way with Tennessee. Everybody that wanted to get married down there, and their parents wouldn't let them. Well, they could run up to Bristol, Tennessee and get married, because all they had to do was just barely cross the state line and run away to Bristol, and you were married. Of course, back then in a Model T Ford, it took you some time to get up there. And I'll tell you another tale. This is terrible. When I was a kid, my brother-in-law bought this brand new car. And it was the finest thing you ever saw in your life. I had never saw anything like it. It was a Model T Ford. A brand new one. And he paid $500 for it. And he took us up the road for a ride. And we went up to the next man's gate. And turned around and come back. I told Michael just the other day that I knew good and well that I'll bet he made 5 miles an hour up that road. Michael said, "Mother, knock that down to 3. But back then we thought it was really something, you know.
What about moonshiners in that part of the country?
Oh, they were plenty of them. But that was like the AIDS. Excuse me. This little cave right above this big one where I was telling you about. Well, I went up there Mom one time to take care of the milk and butter and everything up there. And for some reason or other, she thought she saw something up this little cave. And she went up there and took her stick, in case of snakes. And she looked and looked, and she said, "Let's go to the house. I want to talk to your daddy." And I didn't find it out right then, because you didn't tell your kids anything. Somebody was making liquor in that little cave. They had their still in it. nobody bothered that because they were afraid to. And I might have told you about me and my sister and my cousins finding this barrel of mash one night. Up in the woods. Well, darn it. Excuse me. Well, we didn't know what on earth was in that barrel. Sunday afternoon, and we asked Mom, could we just go a little ways up in the holler? And she said yes, but not to go in the woods. But we didn't listen. We just kept going on. We was hunting for dry land turtles, what we was hunting for. We wanted to kill it and see what was inside the shell. Wasn't that terrible? And we did. And you know who got a whipping for it? Me. Because my little sister ran on in front of me and told Mom. But this barrel of mash had a cover on it. It was a burlap sack. And it was tied up real well. But we wanted to see what was in there. And we did. And it was all the way full to the top of this mash. And I'll tell you what it looked like. It looked like cream of wheat. And it had with juice or whatever you call it on top of it, about this far down in the barrel. Well, little idiots, we stuck our finger in there and tasted it. And it was delicious. So we just turned around, went back to the house and got us some spoons. And come again. And we just eat that stuff. Well, my little sister, I didn't know that you'd call it drunk. He said she got drunk on it. Her Mom had to come up in the field and carry her out. Well, I didn't know it'd make you drunk. It was so good, you know. Well, the rest of us got hard spankings and told us the longest day we lived never to go up there again. But we heard my mother and Daddy having a talk in the kitchen. And they said that was Charlie Mustard still. And if he caught them kids up there, he'd shoot them. And they told us they'd kill us if we ever went near that again. But we didn't know there's any danger in it, you know. And Mom and Dad did. And they told us not to never tell we'd found that. Never. Then I come home from school early one day, and my mother was a country baby. She born every baby in that country. They didn't have but one doctor, and the time he got in his buggy and got around, he always got there for supper. It would make me so mad. But I come home from school one day, and Daddy was gone. He was going to be gone for 3 days. And there was blankets up over our kitchen window, and the doors were locked. And I couldn't get in the kitchen. And my oldest brother kept yelling for me to get away, go on. And I told him I was hungry, wanted something to eat. And we'll get you something after a while. Me and George is busy in here. Well, I was real mad about it, but I went out to my sister-in-law's house, and she gave me some butter and bread with cinnamon on it, and brown sugar. And my brother and his best friend were making whiskey somewhere or another in my mom's kitchen. Now, don't ask me how they done it, because I don't know.
Did they get in trouble?
They sure did. Because my brother was what you call a grown man. And they sure did get into trouble. Now, do you know what homebrew is?
Oh, yeah.
Well, everybody around there made homebrew. And all my brother-in-laws, and they'd give it to me to drink. Now, my oldest brother, the one that was making that whiskey in there, is the first one that ever gave me a drink. And he gave it to me out of a teaspoon in a cup. I never will forget it. And he said, well, you little devil, you just locked that up like nothing. And the last time I saw him before he died, I was sitting down on we went over there to see him. I was married to the husband I'm married to now. And they were all talking, and I was sitting down on the porch there, and he was sitting up in a chair. He died of a heart attack, and he'd already had one. I wasn't saying a word. I was just sitting there, not saying a word. And he looked down at me just a smiling, and he said, I know you've always been the meanest little devil ever lived and still are. I said, what have I done this time? Nothing, but I'm expecting something any time. And we had a lot of fun. Now, my mother and daddy kept whiskey in their house all the time for medicinal purposes. And we never one time ever thought about taking any of that either. And I dated a boy supposed to be a bootlegger for about a year. I never saw him drunk. He didn't even drink. Or smell it on him or nothing.
How'd they deliver the whiskey?
In the back of their trunk of their cars. Put it in the trunk of their cars. And if the sheriff got after you, just outrun the sheriff. But I'll tell you something happened after I grew up. This one family, Burton's, like I was telling you, the one I dated, and never did smell whiskey or nothing on him, but he had two older brothers, like our family. You take 10 or 12 children in a family, and, some grow up and leave others small and like that. And this Watts Burton, his name was Watts, he was making whiskey, and he didn't have any front door in his shack. It's 2 or 3 rooms, and he was married. And he was making it in there or something. Anyway, they got a new state trooper up playing. He wasn't such a big guy, he was small. And instead of him getting the sheriff to go over there with him to Watts' house, you see, Watts knew the sheriff, and the sheriff knew Watts, and all like that. This little trooper went over there and kicked the door in. And Watts shot him right through there with a shotgun. And they sent him to the penitentiary, and I guess he died down there. I know his wife moved down there where she could be near him. And I guess he's died a long time ago. And the penitentiary gave him life for shooting that state trooper. And I know Mr. Price at the time was sheriff, but he told him the state told the people only the state trooper had to listen to him. And none of this would have happened. That he could reason with Watson and, just kind of overlook the situation. Because he didn't force anybody to buy liquor. It's just like he used to tell Mom and Dad and me and my oldest brother. They voted Bland County dry. And I think me and my oldest brother was the only 2 votes in there. Hard to be wet. And we tried to explain to Mom and Daddy that all you had to do is just drive up there on top of the mountain and get whiskey and beer or anything you wanted, and the Wythe County was getting all the money, and Bland County was getting nothing but the drunks. But the people couldn't see that. They didn't want that drinking in their county, which they got it whether or not they wanted it.
How did the Depression affect you and your family in the 1930s?
Well, there was no money, but we had plenty of food, and we give other people food. Now, I can well remember it. I was little, but I can remember it. And we had our own meat, chicken, and stuff like that. And my mother always bought her sugar by 300 or 500 pounds, not a 2 pound thing. And you bought flour the same way. And you bought a barrel of coffee. Or a barrel of whatever you wanted, cornmeal or whatever. Or if you didn't have your own, which Daddy had his own wheat and the corn, and then he took it to the mill. And the Depression wasn't too awful. Well, it wasn't good, but we made it without, dying. We didn't have everything in the world. But we made it. And helped other people. I can very well remember my daddy giving other people meat. Things like that. The people sitting on their front porches when he was working.
Now, you were in the war, correct?
Mm-hmm.
What'd you do in the war?
Medical technician.
When'd you join the Army?
I waited and nursed the boys that had jungle rot, hepatitis, and every other disease. A leukemia, that was a bad disease too for them to get.
Now, when'd you join? What year?
What year did the war break out?
December of 41.
Well, I must have went in I don't know if it's 43 or 44. Must have been 44.
Did you do any work for the war effort before then?
Oh, yeah.
What'd you do?
Well, before I went in the Army, I was working in the powder plant.
What'd you do?
Bag powder.
Black powder?
Mm-hmm.
What, for artillery or?
Yeah. You took a little thing, not quite as big as a thimble. You know how big a thimble is. And you put so much of that in each one of these little bags, and when you got through, you had 4. And you had to weigh it. Pass it on down the line for someone else to sew up and on down the line, you know. But that's what I done. And you could not smoke in there. And you could smoke no place around there. But we did get breaks pretty regular. So I love the night shift. I've always loved to work at night. I don't know why, but I do. And me and my little girlfriend was down over the hill, sneaking us a cigarette. And our boss come down there. He was the best guy, and his name was Joe. I remember that very well. I knew I'd catch you if I just kept on watching. I said, well, since you're down here, just have a cigarette with us. Or maybe I'll just take a drag. So we did, and then he marched us back up to our job, and on your next break, I don't want to catch you over the hill. You know, we make real good money.
How long did you work there?
Oh, I guess it's over about 2 years.
And where was that plant?
Radford, Virginia. Part of it is still down there now, only they call it Hercules powder plant now. And I can't remember what to call that. But that beauty culture school Patsy Kline went to was a little French beauty academy in Bluefield, West Virginia.
Tell me, did you go through basic training in the Army?
Are you kidding? They sent us to Georgia. Well, let's see, I think we went to Tennessee first. On a bus. Well, there was so many mountains, and it looked like a dirt road to me. Fast as we get up out of the floorboard, get back in our seats, go around another curve, back to the floorboard you went. Well, we thought when we got there that we was going to get some rest and, you know, get to take a bath and a nice meal. We just knew that we'd get that. And when we got there, we were called into this room, quarter something. Darn, I can't even remember the full CQ charge of quarters. Yeah. In there. And we were given an old slicker. You know what they are. Come on down here. And we were given a shovel. And she took us out there and showed us this pile of coal. My God, I wouldn't know how many tons there was of it. And told us she wanted all this coal put in bins. Well, some of the girls tried to run away. Some of them screamed and cried. But I was talking to an old big girl from New York. And she'd already made fun of the accent. That was all right. She calmed down by the time this coal bin deal come around. And I told her there wasn't one thing for us to do. We got ourselves in that mess. and just to get herself out that I wasn't writing my mother and my family, telling them that I didn't like it. All right, she said, you start here and I'll start here, and we'll meet each other, and maybe that way we can get it done faster, you know. So we did. And some of them got discharged that very day because of the way they done, you know. But we didn't. We stuck it out. And when we got all this coal moved, we knew then we were going to get something to eat. But she took us into the barracks. And we had to get down with Lord brushes and scrub that floor till it was white as snow. It must have been made out of pine, because I have never yet seen any wood come that white. And after we got through that, to the sergeant's satisfaction, why, then she gave us a bedroll. And we had to make up that bunk till you could bounce a quarter on the top of it.
Is the male sergeant or female sergeant?
Female. So, then, let me see, what did we do? Oh, we had to go hunt kindling to make fires, and there wasn't no woods around there with stuffed paper or nothing, and you had a hell of a time hunting something to make fires. Had coal stoves, you know.
And what part of Georgia was this?
Fort Oglethorpe.
Fort Oglethorpe.
Uh-huh. That's all I know about it, Fort Oglethorpe, because we were never allowed out. But we did run off to Tennessee one time when we got a few hours free, and half of us got drunk. And every time I turned around, I was doing something I got KP for. Things I never knew. But I finally got on the good side of that big old sergeant, and she was the best thing in the world for me. And she trusted me. And then I had, when I moved on to Pennsylvania, Valley Forge, Pennsylvania, why, I had it made up there then. I knew how to put my food in my pocket without having to eat all that mess. So you had to eat every bite was put on your plate. My God, you couldn't do it. And besides, it was prepared very poorly, and I know how we broke the eggs. You should see us breaking them eggs for breakfast. And I just couldn't eat them. And then she drilled us, and she drilled us, and she drilled us till you think you was going to drop dead. But you didn't. But one time, we had cotton hose and shoes. Oh, we had dress shoes in the thing. We had slippers finally when we got our dress uniform. But we were drilling, and there was an old lady. She was older than me at the time. There were some old ones in there, and they thought we'd do their work, but we didn't. But her stocker top come down over her shoe when we were marching, and this other girl that was marching next to me, we got tickled. I couldn't help but laugh. I'd have laughed if that sergeant would have killed me. She said, "Pat, I'll see you in the orderly room." I said, "Yes, ma'am." So, there was some more windows to wash, but it was all that big sergeant could do to keep that smile off her face. And she's forever telling me, "Wipe that smile off my face." And it was all she could do to keep her smiling at that time. So then this other first lieutenant, she took us up, and we had to take exercise too. My gosh, did we ever take exercise. So she took us up there in the street to give us our exercise. And she was going to teach us how to fall properly when we fainted. But you know what happened to her? She fainted. And she didn't fall properly either. I don't think we didn't get the sergeant told about that. And her too. I guess she must have been feeling bad or something, you know, when she went up there and the sun was hot, and she just fainted. But we really had a ball over that one. Her taking us up there to teach us how to fall when we fainted. Like as if you're going to faint, you're going to pick you out position to land in. But gosh, we really had a good time in some ways. But we worked hard. I had a bunch of trouble with my hand and my arms. I used too much disinfectant and it was so strong. Gosh, got my arms into, and I scratched it too, just into sores. And I had to have them wrapped up, and at that time they offered me furlough to come home, and I wouldn't dare come back home like that. So I stayed in Asheville, North Carolina at a hotel. It didn't cost you a month's pay then. And by the way, I made $90 a month.
That's good money back then.
Yeah, that was wonderful money. We had money for all kinds of things. But now, before I come out of the Army, we were allowed to wear civilian clothes to town. But none of us wanted anything to do with a 4F. And a soldier would have a fit if he saw a whack out with a sailor and try to kill the sailor. Whether they wanted to go out with you or not, it just wasn't done. But I met Bill way away from there after I got out of service.
Now, did you go through medical school also?
Yes, you had to take medical training.
Where'd you take that?
At no, I took mine at Fort Bragg, North Carolina. And I thought Fort Bragg, North Carolina in March was heaven. After all that snow and rain and stuff in Georgia. We come down there and the grass was green. And I'd broke my foot in Fort Oglethorpe. Broke my ankle, drilling in mud. And they said they couldn't do anything about it till I got to North Carolina. So they sent us on the train, and I didn't have any seat. Well, the biggest part of it didn't have any seat. There were soldiers on there. And this soldier told me, since my ankle was just swelled out, something awful, he said, since you acted so much like a cripple, I'll let you sit on my lap if you'll be nice. I said, oh, I promise. And I sat on that poor soldier's lap all the way to North Carolina. And then they met us down there with another dump truck. And I still couldn't get in the hospital that night because you had to be interrogated and all that stuff, you know. But the next day they did put me in the hospital. And guess what they did for that broken ankle? They bandaged it. And they had a whole thing like a hoof. It went over you. It took an electric light bulb for heat. And there you lay with that on your ankle till it healed.
That's all they did.
That's all they did. But God, I had a lot of fun in Fort Bragg, North Carolina.
What'd you do?
Not Fort Bragg. Yeah. Well, these little doctors would come in, you know. I think our lowest rank was second lieutenant. I believe it was. I can't be sure. But you see, they was trying to make their way into there too, and get into stuff, you know, and not let nobody catch them. So I'd been in there quite a while, and I was going down the corridor one night, and they was going by punching the light bulbs out, and I caught them. And I made them, everyone, go in charge of quarters. You see, they'd be 10 wards, and then a charge of quarter girl and nurse, whacking a nurse, and on down the line. So we took them in there, and I took them in there, and my nurse was in there, and I knew she'd drink everything she could get hold of. She took all their names and everything, and she told them, well, she might let them go that time if one of them would go up to the KP and get us a case of beer. Well, he went, and it was dangerous because he could have got shot. But he got the beer, brought it back, and we divided up and drank it. And let the little doctors go on their way. And you know, I used to answer the phone for the a Captain Neck author when I worked for, and I just loved him. And he had a girlfriend. At the time, he was older than I was. But he had a girlfriend, and he'll need to give her certain messages if she called, you know. And he'd be off some other office or someplace. So this Polish whack, she got to steal my chocolate milk every day. And lots of times I'd take chocolate milk with me for lunch to keep from going back to mess hall. It was a long ways to walk to mess hall. And she got to stealing it. So Captain Arthur said, I'll tell you what, I'll fix her up. He said, in the morning, he said, you bring your chocolate milk in here to me and give it to me. And then I'll put it back on the shelf. And said, now don't you get it, you could let her go ahead and get it. And I don't know what he put in it. I don't know to this day. But she stole it, and it gave her diarrhea till she couldn't work for 2 days. And she come jumped on me and said I'd put poison in it. And he called her into his office. And he told her he thought I was lying about somebody stealing my chocolate milk. And he wanted to make sure I wasn't lying, and that's why he puts medicine in there. Said not anything will hurt you. So she never took her chocolate milk again.
So did you treat the soldiers mainly at Fort Bragg? Is that where you worked?
And Valley Forge, I was at Valley Forge longer than I was at Fort Bragg. I think I was in Fort Bragg about a year before I went to Valley Forge.
Now, are these soldiers, they Pacific Theater, European Theater, or both?
Most of them Pacific.
And what cases were you treating? What? You mentioned...
Burns. Oh, so many of them were burned just half to death. And more jungle rot and broken bones with that diphtheria in the broken bones, the wounds and things. Now diphtheria, and it wouldn't heal. And oh God, and one job we had was to take the plaster casts off every morning and let them air out. And them boys' legs would smell till you just couldn't hardly stand it. And they knew they smelled, and they'd tell us they felt so sorry for us. And I know some of them was such good-looking boys, you know, and the ones that their face was burnt, they'd show you pictures of them before they went over there. Real good-looking boys, and I don't care how much plastic surgery they done, they could never make those boys look the same again. And it just would break your heart, you know, to see them. And I used to feel kind of sorry for the prisoners. They'd point their fingers at little children, and tell one tell the other to look. And they served us our meals most of the time, and the trustees. But they were always very nice, you know. Well, they couldn't have got out of.
They said the prisoners?
Yeah. The ones they trusted, you know.
Now these prisoners in the state penitentiary or what?
No, they were there at Fort Augusta I don't mean Fort Augusta, Fort Bragg, North Carolina, Pennsylvania. They were there just, of course they pinned them up at night.
I mean, who were these guys?
A part of them were Germans.
Oh, they were German?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, German POWs, okay.
And then there's a lot of boys that just went nuts. And they pinned them up too. I really felt sorry for those. And I used to give them drugs off a cigarette.
Now, how did the Germans react to you and the Americans and all that?
Just nice, and that was all. Because you couldn't understand too much of what they're saying, but you could understand them enough that they were nice, you know. They never did try to put anything over on any of us or anything. But one of them, I don't know where he got the rope or anything, but I was in charge of quarters that night, and I had to go and inspect the barracks, and well, they was building a new gym. And I always done the inspection before I blew the whistle for the girls to get up. And I had to inspect this gym that they were building to see if there was no wax out around there making love or nothing, you know. I'd sneaked out. And this guy had hung himself, and there he hung.
Was he German?
Uh-huh. They never knew how he got out, how he got the rope, or nothing. And then I had to call back down to the main gate of the MPs and tell them to come get him down. Then I had to go into where all these big shot officers was and tell exactly what I saw when I went down there. And that's all I saw because it scared me to death, him hanging there. And what time it was. I could very well do that because I knew what time, I had to make my round.
How many patients were at Valley Forge?
I really don't know, but I know there was a lot. There was lots of them, but I just don't really know. I got fooled so bad by George Washington throwing the quarter across the Delaware. There it was his little cabin, and there was a river, wasn't it? He's supposed to throw it across the river, and that river was about as wide as from me to you. Maybe it was wider then, I don't know, when he drew across it or threw the money across or something. Could have been wider, I wasn't around then, and a big mouth to me, I said, well, I could have done that. And one time, we went to Washington. We was going to Fort Dix, New Jersey, and we ate hot dogs on the steps of the White House.
Was Roosevelt there?
Mm-hmm. And we didn't see him. We saw her lots of times, and she didn't seem to care for us, and we didn't care for her either.
Eleanor?
Mm-hmm.
How come you at the White House? Why were you there?
We were going to Fort Dix, and we had some time off, and we just wanted to look around, and the guards let us. We had the hot dogs, and the guards let us sit on the steps and eat them. We, wasn't doing anything, wasn't out of our way, because other people could go there if they wanted to. And we were in a group.
So how long were you at Valley Forge?
I must have been there 2 years.
And then went to Fort Dix?
You see, yeah, I come out. I'd been in there 2 years, and I decided to get out. And I got discharged with an option that I could come back in if I wanted to, And I come out, and I disgraced my parents for going in the first place, till my brother come home from the army and set them straight. The boys were all gone. There was no girls or anything for me to have anything. It just wasn't home. The army had just become a family to me, So I just signed up and went back in. Well, that time I went to Richmond, Virginia, and they put me in charge of all these little recruits. Well, did I ever have a ball on that train? You see, I could have beer, but they couldn't. And I had all their tickets and all their money and everything. And they were right after me every minute. And when I got my beer, they thought they should have beer too, and they couldn't have beer because they were recruits and young too, But they wouldn't leave my side for me to go to the bathroom. I guess he's afraid I'd lose them or, get away from them or something, which I couldn't because I was under orders to go with them.
Now, was this after the war or was it during the war?
During the war.
During the war.
Mm-hmm.
What did you do when the war ended? Was there a big celebration there?
I was uptown, and I was with 2 soldier patients and some more girls, and we were going into North Carolina and Cherokee country to get a gallon of bootleg whiskey. Now that's exactly where we were, because North Carolina was dry all except 3-2 beer. And it come out over a loudspeaker. And one of those guys grabbed me and set me up on top of somebody's car. and they were screaming and yelling and tearing up things and just took over the restaurants and everything else. And that's one night I didn't get back home on time. But there wasn't anything said about it.
Are you in North Carolina
Mhm.
at that time?
Now wasn't Valley Forge when it ended.
But you're going to North Carolina.
Yeah, in Phoenixville. And I got married up there, and I stayed in the Army. I didn't come out until my baby was born. She was born in the Army hospital, Valley Forge General Hospital.
And where'd you meet your husband?
My first one, he stepped on my toe in the chow line. He was in front of me. And I don't know how he managed to step on my toe, but I said, I wish you'd keep your big feet under you, please. And he said he thought at that time I was the cutest little thing he ever saw in his life. And he could tell right off I was from the South, he said. I don't know how. But that man never could keep his eyes off other girls. And he was a good-looking thing. Oh, hell, he was the best-looking thing you ever saw in your life. Mike might have his picture. I don't know. I had a couple of them. I told Jackie she could have one of them, and she didn't want it. She said she had all of her daddy's pictures she wanted, talking about my husband I'm married to now. Mike's probably got his picture someplace. He was good looking, but he was French. And when he talked to his sister on the phone, he wouldn't talk where I could understand. He talked in French. He wrote his letters, he wrote in French. But he really made me mad one time when I was trying to get him to go home with me when the baby was born. And he said he heard those people down there kept a shotgun behind every door.
Did he go home with you?
He left. And then he's gone a long time, and he called me up and run up to Virginia and wanted me to meet him down there. And my mom and daddy didn't want me to go. And they said I could not take Jackie with me, the baby. And I said, well, I don't need to. And I met him down there, and he was going to come back to me, and all these promises and everything. We went to a hotel, stayed all night. On come little Mike. And that's when I left and went to Norfolk. That's why Mike was born in Norfolk. I don't know whatever become of his father. And I did send some pictures to my husband's daddy of Jackie, and the pictures never did come back. And I sent a picture of Mike once, and it never did come back. So I sent them to his father, and they must have kept the pictures. But that's the last I ever heard of him. So when I went to Norfolk, and Mike was not too old when I met Bill. I guess he's about a year old when I met Bill. I met him in a bar. I was coming home from work and stopped in this bar to get me a beer, and he and some more sailors were sitting over there and drinking their beer, minding their business, and I was sitting drinking mine by myself, minding my business. But I thought that guy had the prettiest smile I ever saw in my life, and he looked so happy. So I decided next evening I'd stop in again, see if he was there, and he was there. And this time he's by himself. So he come over and asked me would I join him for a beer. And I said, nope. I said, you join me. So then every evening we stop in there. And then he had to go back out on ship. And sometimes I'd get 4 and 5 letters at a time. How much he loved me and how he loves me, and he still does. And every time we planned to get married, he'd have to go back out again. So he spent 14 years in the Navy, and he decided to get discharged. So he'd been married before, but he come home on leave and his wife didn't know he was coming and he caught her living with another man. So he beat the hell out of her and the man, got himself in jail, and never went back again. He has grandchildren in California, and I begged him to go see them and his children. And his son come to see us once, but he didn't like our way of living. And he said, don't you ever go any place or do anything for entertainment? I said, nope. I said, your father don't like to. You mean you just sit here all the time? I said, most generally. Well, he didn't used to do that. I said, well, he's a changed man after I married him. He had his ways. All he wanted was home. And finally he broke me down till that's all I wanted to.
So
It took him a lot of years, but he finally broke me down to his way of thinking.
How long were you in the Army altogether? How many years?
Over 4 years. My discharge is back home in the safety deposit box.
Now, what made you decide to go to beauty school?
Well, I wanted a career or something. And I started nursing, and I had 6 months nurses training in. And I changed my mind to beauty culture. And I wish later that I'd went on with my nursing, but I didn't. Because I was always very good at that. And I used to have a beauty shop at my daddy's home. And Daddy loved to peep around the door watching me doing these two old maids' hair, because he told me that he could go out there and get me some hair out of the horse's tail, and I could glue a little bunch, and one of them was just practically bald with these women. And I could glue it up there. And he would peep around that door. He was just mean as I was. But they wasn't paying very well. You know, well, here's your $1, and I'll bring you some more money next time. You know. Well, it was my dad's water and electricity, and of course the other equipment belonged to me. So I decided to move on doing something else, and I went to Norfolk and went to work as a nurse's aide in DePaul's hospital. That's where Mike was born. Well, this lady come over there, and she was rich, and she had married an old doctor and had a stroke. And she told me how much she would give me if I would quit there and go to her house and stay at her home and just take care of her house. That sounded like a pretty good deal to me. And me being pregnant with Michael and everything. So that's what I done. And then I met some police officers down there that was friends of hers. And they told me if ever I got sick by myself there, because everybody goes to the beach, you see, to call them. And they'd come and get me taken to the hospital. So I called them one day, and they come for me, but it was too late. I had to bet my poor little Mikey in the police car. And them officers was so good and so nice. And then they took me on to the hospital.
So Mike was born in a police car.
Put it on mine.
When did you meet Patsy Kline?
Well, I'd say that Kimmy must have been a year or, Jackie. A year or 18 months old. She's 38 years old now.
Now, did you and her start the school together?
I think it was about the same time, because I think it was a certain class went in at a certain date, you know.
Yeah.
But I don't remember graduating with her. I'll tell you the truth, I don't remember many of them that I did graduate with. Now, somewhere I've got a picture of all of them. I don't know if Michael's... No, that was an Army picture he's got.
What kind of person is Patsy?
She was this cute little old girl. Full of meanness like all the rest of us. And her father and her brother sing. And she liked to sing, but they wouldn't let her go with them. They didn't want her along. So then, several years later, I heard on the radio or something, or one of the girls wrote me that Patsy had finally got her change and was singing. And I was real happy for her.
What kind of personality did she have?
Oh, she was just a bubbly little old happy girl. She was very bad taking our money out of her pockets when we take to buy lunch. And she'd get that money every time going home for her lunch. But we never thought nothing about that.
Where was she from?
At that time, she lived in Bluefield, West Virginia. But I don't think they own a home. I think they rent it. Now, she never did take anybody home with her or anything, you know.
You never said any stories about her at the beauty school? She was in the car.
Mm-hmm.
You ever see her after she got her career started, her singing career?
No. Nothing only on a TV. And there'd be a piece of paper about her once in a while, but at that time I really never paid much attention to it, you know. Till after she got killed and...
And she was killed in 62, 3?
I just can't remember. All I remember, they said they found a red petticoat in a tree someplace. And I said, oh gosh, that sounded like little Patsy, because she loved to wear outlandish things.
What do you mean outlandish? What?
Oh, a big ruffly skirt. And back then, they wore crinoline petticoats. If you know what they are. Make your dresses stick out, you know. And the more you get on, the better. And Patsy, she liked red ones. Of course, they couldn't wear them for uniforms. But when you got out of there, you could. And then you dressed to go home.
Where were you living at that time?
Well, I had 2 rooms, and I stayed in Bluefield, West Virginia, and I'd come home every Friday to my parents' house, and Mom took care of Jackie for me. Did you ever hear that song, If I Knew Just Coming, I'd Have Baked a Cake? Well, now that was very popular then. Had I known just coming, I'd baked a cake or something like that. And sometime we'd go down to the dime store to eat, all of us, maybe on a Thursday or something like that. We'd all go down to the dime store and eat our lunch. Back then they had real dime stores. There was things in there you could buy for 10 cents, like a Coke or hot dog or things like that.
So, what are you doing these days?
Sitting in the house watching TV and writing letters or cards. I love to write. And I love to send cards. And this as long as I know anybody's sick or reading the paper where they're sick, I get my card box out and start writing. And birthdays, I love to send Mikey things for his birthdays. I've got a whole list of my pocketbook. Of course, I think he needs money worse than anything, but I got to send him something besides money too. And I watch TV, and I clean my house, and I've got a big house. I have to go upstairs a couple times a month to water my flowers, plants. And there's a great big rooms upstairs. One room, I call it the ward. I've got 2 beds in it. and dresser, and I called it the ward. Then the other one, I've got a real pretty old bedroom suite for company if it's just two people or somebody wants to sleep together, you know, or something. Then I got three bedrooms downstairs. And a big living room all the way across the front, and a big dining room. My kitchen's small, but it suits me just fine. Till I start to get breakfast, my husband starts running out to the patio and garage and back and forth and catches me behind the door. I'd love for you to come and visit us. I'd just love for you to. I'd love for you to come. And when I go home, I want you to write me. And I want your address of where you get your mail before that I'll leave here. Okay. And I'll write you and let you know that I get along well, and I want you to occasionally write me how Mike's doing. Okay. Because he don't write me, he calls me. And that Saturday morning, he didn't call me. And I said, Bill, there's something wrong with Mike. I said, he didn't call me. And Bill said, oh, he's probably out having a big time or gone someplace or something. He'll call you later. But Mike didn't call me. And I think it was the 4th of April. And it was 10 o'clock in the morning. We were eating breakfast, my husband and I. And I got that call from Mike. And he said he's in the hospital, he had AIDS. And I'll admit I died a dozen times. Because to me, AIDS just meant one thing, death. And his daddy cried too. But we've never told Jackie. And I don't see any point in telling her. I just told her he had cancer. Well, he has. And the people down there are very narrow-minded about AIDS. They're very narrow-minded. They're not educated about it. Just my doctor and the ministers are the only people I can talk to about it, and Bill, of course. And oh, Bill is so scared of AIDS, my goodness. Mike told him the other night he's coming home Christmas, and Bill knows how sick he is now, because I wrote Bill. And Bill said, all right, Mike, we'll see about it now. And if he went home, Bill wouldn't say nothing. I don't know what he'd think, but he wouldn't say nothing. Now, he may shy away from him, I don't know. Because my husband thinks you can sit down by anybody and get them, you know. And I've tried to preach to him. My doctor's tried to preach to him. And my minister's tried to preach to him, and he does love this one minister. He's known Mike since he's a little boy, the minister. But now you can't get that into my husband's head any other way.
What time is
It's 2:30. Now I'll be right here by 2 o'clock, Mother. Poor little Patsy, she was a cute little girl.
And they lived, what was her husband's name?
You know, I don't know that.
In the movie they said Charlie. Is that his name?
I don't know who she married. I can't remember.
And I think they lived in Nashville.
I imagine she did. Memphis or someplace out in there. But I never saw her as she started singing except on television, you know, or something. And then I remember seeing in the papers when she got killed. Who they were, because Michael never told me. Frank, what's his name? Frank Williams. He's the one that wrote me a letter to tell me about Michael. He told me about him being sick, and he said he had took him to the airport to get his plane ticket to come home. He was supposed to come home the 2nd of May. And he never made it. I know God, I was looking forward to that. He come down there with Sam, and then he had to go on to West Virginia with Sam to hunt up these dead relatives of Sam's. And go through all the graveyards hunting more dead relatives, which Sam should have been left down there. Forgive me for talking so mean. And then he wanted Mike to be going all the time till the last week. And they did stay at home some that week. And I know it just killed me when Mike left. I wanted him to stay home so bad. And he did talk about, in March, coming back, going to school over there at Hocking Tech. And I so in hopes he would come. And I told him the other day, I said, honey, maybe you wouldn't have got AIDS had you come back home then. And he said, Mother, I didn't know it then, but I already had them. And he's told me over the phone that he wouldn't come back home for anything to disgrace us, you know, or anything like that. And he knows the people down in there. He knows my family, my people. I got one sister that makes everybody's business her business.
Ever heard about the people that have it and their family just disowns it?
Yes, I've read about it and heard about it.
That must be sad.
I couldn't do it. But I'll tell you one thing. If Michael's leaving Christmas and he's able to get there, I'm going to see it he comes home. I got too big a house, and down there's a farm, and it's got a big house on it. And if my husband's afraid to stay with Mikey there, he can go right down to the farm where he loves to stay anyway.
Now, you live in Ohio?
Uh-huh. And Mikey can stay with me. We can have us a good time right there. But I believe if Bill would see Mike, you see, Bill don't even know how AIDS works, you know. He just knows AIDS and that's all. And he knows about Michael having the cancer, because I told him myself. But I think if he could see him, he would better understand. But if he's living and able to come home Christmas, I'm going to see that he comes home. Now, if Michael should die or anything happens to him, I want to take him back to Bland County, where I was born and raised, to the cemetery where he can be buried by me.
There in Virginia?
We have a whole big plot, going a strip going all the way up through the graveyard. And it's a well-kept graveyard. And just not long ago they put a fence around it because somebody's horse had got out and got in there. And it's well took care of, but the horse some that way, had got in the woods and got out. So right away, they wrote my husband to donate some money for the fence, and they put the fence around it. And he told me this piece of poetry when I first come up here that he won on his tombstone. And I can't remember, so I'm going to ask him what the poem was that he was reading me when I first come up here. I want to take it home with me. I liked it. I'll tell him I want to put it on my icebox or something. Well, he laughed at me here a while back till he couldn't laugh. He sent me some pictures. It was before he got sick. Yeah. Maybe it wasn't, I just don't remember. But anyway, he wasn't in the hospital or anything. But he told me to keep the colored picture, there's 5 to 7, and to give Jackie the black and white one that come off of these. That some of these that he's gonna give me and take home with. So I give my daughter the black and white one, and I kept the other one that he told me to keep. And one day it come to me that he'd sent me some larger pictures, and I couldn't find them. I thought they'd laying right there on my dining room table, and I couldn't find them. And you know, I tore that whole house up. Dresser drawers. I just wrecked that whole house hunting for those pictures, and I could not find them. So I called him, and I told him that I'd lost those pictures and couldn't find them anyplace. And he started laughing. He said, "Mother, I haven't sent you the pictures yet." I said, "You mean to tell me that I done all this hard work hunting the pictures that you've got at your home?" "Yeah, that's what you done, Mother." But the lad, when him and Sam was there, he had this made down on the farm. Had his jeans on, his cap, and he sent it to me. And I give Jackie the other one. Now he has given me these to take home with. I'll have a lot of memories to take home with me, but not my boy. And that picture there, and that is the lonesomest picture I've ever saw in my life. He had that in his house the first time he married. You wouldn't have caught Becky with a thing like that in her house. And the first time my husband saw Becky, he just said, "She's not the woman for Mike." That's all he said. All he ever did say. And when they separated, Bill says, "I'm not a bit surprised." And he showed me that road that road like that he used to work on in the hot sun.
The road.
Yeah, a highway. I remember maybe it was one just like it. And he told me that's the hardest work he ever done in his life. He said it like to kill him.
Where was this?
Well, it could have been in Texas. And when he got this job, he told me he just loved this job better than anything in the world. This job he's got now. You know, I sit up here and smoke too much. My doctors will kill me when I get home. Well, you know that's Mikey's little boy over there, don't you?
Yeah.
That picture. And that's my mommy over there.
Is she in Virginia?
Yeah, she's buried in Virginia.
Oh, she's buried there?
She died the 24th of February, and she would have been 95 years old the 22nd of March.